If the person you trusted most in this world betrayed you silently for years, would you forgive, or would you finally stand up and demand the truth? That thought hit Aisha Bello like a punch she couldn't dodge. Lagos was alive outside her apartment window, but inside, her heart pounded in rhythm with a storm of doubt, fear, and anticipation. Tonight, everything might change or shatter completely. Aisha had always believed in the power of loyalty. She believed in enduring the hardships of life with quiet dignity, in giving trust fully, and in holding back her own tears until they were private. But now, after 7 years of sacrifices, the foundation of her life felt like shifting sand. She had built a career from scratch, battled the city's relentless grind, and held her family together emotionally, all while loving a man who promised the world but seemed to hide half of it. From her phone buzzed again. Another message from Kanal. Asha. We need to talk tonight. It's important. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Every instinct screamed to ignore him, but years of care and hope pulled her forward. Lagos traffic roared below, a constant reminder that life never waits, that time is cruel, and that patience has a price. Asha's mind flashed back to her first days in the city bright-eyed, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She remembered the hustle at Lekki Market, the first time she got lost in Victoria Island, and how she met Kunal at a friend's engagement party in Surulere. He had seemed like a man who could hold the universe in his hands. Confident, charming, ambitious, she smiled faintly at the memory, but it was bitter now. She remembered his words from years ago, almost like prophecy. Some sacrifices are invisible. You won't even notice until it's too late. At the time, Aisha thought he meant hard work, late nights, and career choices. Now she realized those words might have been about her heart. The elevator dinged, and she stepped inside, pressed the button for the 12th floor, and felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The walls reflected a soft fluorescent glow, but nothing bright enough to lift the heaviness she carried. She recalled how she had always been told by her mother, "A woman's strength is quiet. Let the world test you. Let betrayal teach you wisdom." Every time she faced injustice, every time she swallowed anger, those words had been her guide, and yet tonight felt different. The messages, Kunal's tone, the way the city lights flickered through the glass, it all felt like a warning. Asha wondered silently, had her patience been mistaken for weakness? Was she finally about to discover that some tears were not just for healing, but preparation? She reached their apartment door, took a deep breath, and inserted her key. The corridor lights reflected off polished tiles, stretching long shadows behind her like unseen witnesses. The door swung open. Lights on. Kunal standing there. Early. Calm. Too calm. Something in her chest tightened. Something told her, this is not just a conversation. This is a reckoning. And in that moment, Aisha knew that everything she had endured, every tear shed in silence, and every act of quiet strength had led her to this very second. She didn't yet know the depth of what awaited her, but one thing was certain: the life she had known was about to change forever. The city hadn't always been a battlefield for Aisha. 7 years ago, she arrived in Lagos carrying nothing but 2 suitcases, a worn-out teaching certificate, and a heart full of hope. She had come from a small town in Enugu, where life was slower and dreams were whispered under the baobab trees. Lagos was different, fast, relentless, unforgiving, but it promised opportunity. Every morning she navigated the crowded streets of Yaba, stepping carefully between motorbikes and street vendors, learning quickly that survival required more than intelligence. It required resilience. It was at a friend's engagement party in Surulere that she first saw Kunal Adeyemi. He stood across the room, a tall figure with a commanding presence, laughing easily and talking to everyone like he owned the world. His charm was magnetic. He spoke about business growth, ambition, words that resonated with her own dreams. He didn't just offer promises. He painted pictures of possibilities, and Aisha, hungry for hope and love, fell in without hesitation. "I've never met anyone like you," Kunal said, catching her gaze across the room. "You think like me, and I mean that as a compliment." Aisha blushed, but beneath it, a spark of caution flickered. She remembered her mother's warning. A heart too eager will often be tested harshly. But the city had already taught her patience in other ways: long bus rides, missed interviews and nights spent studying under dim streetlights. Connell's confidence seemed different. It felt safe, even powerful. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Shared meals at Lecky cafes, long walks along the marina, dreams exchanged on crowded BRT buses. Connell had a way of making Aisha feel like the only person in a room full of millions. He encouraged her, celebrated her small victories, and even argued with her on the rare occasions they disagreed, always leaving her feeling stronger, smarter, validated. Yet, even in those early days, subtle shadows appeared. He was often distracted by calls he refused to explain. Small contradictions in his stories slipped through unnoticed. And once, when she suggested checking a financial document for her new tutoring project, he had laughed softly, saying, "Some things are best left in trust, not inspection." She had smiled, shrugging it off as charm, not realizing it was a seed planted for years of doubt. Aisha also noticed the city's reaction to Connell. Friends and strangers alike whispered, sometimes admiringly, sometimes jealously. She saw women glance at him with curiosity and men with envy. She sensed the fragile thread that held this perfect world together, but she ignored the tension. For the first time in her life, she felt her loyalty, her patience, and her intelligence rewarded by someone who seemed worthy of them. By the end of that first year, she trusted him completely. Her life felt like a rising tide, carrying both their dreams. She rented a modest apartment in Lecky Phase 1, decorated it carefully with items that reminded her of home, and allowed herself to imagine a future filled with security, love, and partnership. But shadows she didn't yet know had been gathering. The charm Connell exuded was not just confidence, it was calculation. And the deeper her trust grew, the further she would have to fall before she could discover the strength that had been quietly growing within her. For now, Aisha believed in love, loyalty, and the city that never slept. She believed in him. And that belief, though beautiful, would soon be tested in ways that would make every tear she had ever shed a lesson in survival. It started with small things, a missed phone call, an unexplained delay, a vague excuse. At first, Aisha dismissed them as the normal chaos of Lagos life or the pressures of Connell's ambitions. She told herself she was overthinking, that trust was about patience and forgiveness. But over time, the inconsistencies grew sharper, impossible to ignore. One evening, she returned home early from tutoring a group of students in Surulere. She'd been juggling work, side jobs, and community lessons, sacrificing sleep and personal comfort, but she loved her students. She had believed in balance, believing Connell shared that vision. What she found, however, felt like a storm crashing into her carefully constructed life. Connell was not alone. She caught the edge of a familiar laugh in the living room, one that didn't belong. Aisha froze. Her mind raced. Could it be what she feared? Her heart sank, the room spinning slightly as Betrayal finally stepped out from the shadows. "Connell, who's with you?" she asked, voice steady though her stomach twisted. He looked up, a practiced calm settling over his features. "Aisha, it's nothing, just a friend." But she knew. She had been blind for too long. That night, the polished mask of love shattered. It wasn't just a friend, it was a long pattern of hidden truths. Emails she'd once glimpsed, messages he'd deleted, and whispers she'd brushed off suddenly screamed at her mind. He had not been entirely honest. Aisha retreated to her bedroom, locking the door. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the familiar walls, and felt a surge of anger mixed with disbelief. Her tears were quiet at first, each one a tiny betrayal of her patience, her loyalty, her years of silent endurance. She thought about the sacrifices she had made, skipping meals to save for rent, working late nights to pay bills Kunal insisted they share, keeping her dignity intact while silently managing her frustrations. Ngozi's words echoed in her mind, the voice of wisdom she had often ignored in her youthful certainty. The heart that gives too much without seeing is not weak. It is waiting for the truth to sharpen it. Aisha's hands clenched her knees. That night, Lagos was a blur outside her window, neon lights cutting across the darkness like flashing questions she had no answers for. She wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but another part of her, something deeper, steadier, urged patience. Strength was not an immediate reaction. Strength was in understanding the full measure of betrayal before moving. The days that followed were tense. Connell became defensive when questioned, charming when needed, evasive when pressed. His words, once sincere, now rang hollow. Friends began to notice her quiet withdrawal, neighbors whispered, and even Chica and Funk hinted at gossip, unaware of the full story. Each conversation, each lie uncovered slowly, carved deeper into Aisha's heart. By the end of the week, she realized the painful truth. The man she had trusted with her life was not the man she thought she knew. Every kindness had a shadow, every promise a silent omission. The betrayal was not just personal, it was strategic, subtle, and had been woven into her life over years. And yet, even in heartbreak, Aisha felt the first stirrings of a new awareness. Something inside her whispered, "This is not the end. This is the moment your strength begins to take shape." Aisha locked herself in her apartment for days, but not in despair. She had cried, yes, letting the tears fall quietly, soaking the pillow with years of silent endurance. But after the flood, a strange calm settled over her. Lagos hummed, outside street vendors calling, cars honking, the hum of life continuing as if nothing had shifted, but she felt a quiet separation, a growing distance from the betrayal that had threatened to break her. She began to think like a strategist. Every decision Connell had made, every omission, every carefully veiled lie, now became lessons she analyzed meticulously. He had underestimated her, she realized. He had assumed loyalty meant weakness, that tears meant surrender. How wrong he had been. Ngozi came by one afternoon, her face serious but gentle. "Aisha, I've watched you endure for years. But strength doesn't always mean silence. Sometimes it's in rising above the ones who wrong you and claiming what you're owed." Aisha nodded, her mind racing. She had been patient, loyal, forgiving, and kind, and it had been used against her. But patience had also taught her observation, careful thinking, and strategy. Strength, she now understood, wasn't loud or vengeful. It was quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. She returned to the tutoring center with a renewed sense of purpose, working harder, expanding her network, and reclaiming small pieces of her life that Connell had unintentionally overshadowed. She began mentoring younger students, offering them advice on survival, resilience, and self-belief in Lagos. Each success, each grateful smile from a student, felt like a reclaiming of power. One evening, as she closed the tutoring center, she noticed a man standing across the street, watching her. Alumide, a wealthy businessman she had met through a community program months ago, smiled knowingly. He had seen her diligence, her integrity, and her quiet strength long before she realized its worth. "You're stronger than most people give you credit for," he said softly. "But strength isn't enough. Strategy and vision must follow." Aisha considered his words. He wasn't offering charity. He wasn't a savior. He was showing her that her strength, combined with knowledge and careful planning, could transform her life entirely. Back at home, she reviewed her finances, planned her career growth, and even explored independent investments. Each small victory built momentum, and with it came confidence. Lagos, once overwhelming, now seemed like a city of possibilities rather than threats, but she didn't forget Connell. His shadow lingered like a cautionary tale, a reminder that not everyone she trusted had honorable intentions. She didn't seek revenge, not yet. That power, she realized, was best wielded when fully understood and deliberately applied. In the quiet hours of the night, Aisha reflected on her mother's wisdom. The woman who bends but does not break is the one who carries the earth on her shoulders and smiles. Her tears, her struggles, her heartbreak, they were not weaknesses. They were the foundation of a strength that could not be shaken. And somewhere deep inside, a new thought began to form, sharp and electrifying. The reckoning with Connell was coming. Not as a desperate confrontation, but as a careful unveiling. A silent demonstration that years of loyalty and endurance had been preparing her for the moment he would finally face the consequences of his deceit. It started with a letter slipped under her door, an anonymous note typed and precise. "You deserve the truth. He has been playing a dangerous game for years." Aisha's hands trembled as she read it. The words confirmed what she had long suspected, but feared to confront. Connell's lies were not just about infidelity. They involved financial manipulation, secret deals, and hidden debts tied to her name. Everything she had built, every sacrifice had been quietly leveraged against her. Her chest tightened. Anger flared, but it was different now, tempered by the patience and resilience she had cultivated. This was not the raw, desperate hurt of years past. It was a sharpened awareness, a controlled storm. She understood fully now that strength was not reactive, it was strategic. She traced Kennel's movements, pieced together months of contradictions, cross-checked bank statements, and called in subtle inquiries through contacts she had built in the city over the years. Each revelation was a sting, but also a confirmation. The man she had loved had underestimated her completely. One evening, she confronted him at the apartment. His calm demeanor faltered only for a fraction of a second, a crack she had learned to detect through years of observation. "Colonel," she began, voice steady but cold. "I know everything." He blinked. "Everything? That's impossible." Aisha's lips curled into the faintest smile. "You thought your careful lies would last forever. But patience has a way of teaching the most painful lessons." Colonel stammered excuses, attempts to charm, to deflect, but they landed empty. Every word he had ever said in love, every promise of shared dreams, now sounded like a rehearsed lie. He could no longer manipulate her silence. The confrontation escalated, but Aisha did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Every calculated look, every quiet pause spoke volumes. She revealed the evidence she had collected: bank transfers, secret communications, false promises. The truth was undeniable. A meticulous web of betrayal laid bare. Connell's expression shifted from shock to desperation, then fear. The power dynamic had reversed entirely. The man who had once held her trust like a weapon now realized he had misjudged. The woman he had tried to control, Aisha paused. She could crush him completely, ruin him publicly if she chose. But she had learned another lesson during her years of tears. Vengeance is empty without purpose. She wanted justice, yes, but she also wanted growth for herself, not just humiliation for him. Instead, she issued a silent verdict. Boundaries were redrawn. Trust would never return. Independence, dignity, and self-respect were now hers to claim. That night, Lagos lights glimmered outside her window, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside. But for Aisha, the city now reflected possibility, power, and resilience. She had survived deception, heartbreak, and manipulation. She had endured in silence, and in that endurance, she had found her greatest weapon, herself. As Connell slunk away, defeated, the realization settled deep into her bones. Years of tears had forged strength so complete no betrayal could ever diminish it. And the next chapter of her life, she knew, would be written on her terms. Morning sunlight spilled across Aisha's apartment, glinting off the polished tiles and Lagos skyline beyond her windows. She sat quietly at the edge of her balcony, sipping tea, letting the warmth settle her. The city's hum no longer felt chaotic. It felt alive, vibrant, full of opportunities she had never dared to imagine before. Connell was gone. The man who had once claimed her heart, manipulated her trust, and used her loyalty as leverage, had finally retreated into the shadows where deceit belonged. He had been defeated, not through loud confrontations or public humiliation, but through patience, strategy, and unshakable resilience. Aisha's phone buzzed. Messages from students, friends, even alumni. Each one reflected admiration, respect, and gratitude. She had become a symbol not of heartbreak, but of endurance and strength. She had survived betrayal, learned the depths of her own patience, and had emerged more powerful than ever. Her mind wandered back to the years of tears. The nights she spent wondering if love was ever worth the pain. Each tear, each sleepless night, each silent sacrifice had been a stepping stone, not a setback. And now, standing at the threshold of her own success, she realized the truth. Strength was not merely enduring. It was transforming pain into purpose. That evening she met with Alumide in a small cafe overlooking Victoria Island. The conversation was casual, yet beneath the surface, it brimmed with possibilities. Investments, partnerships, and new initiatives were discussed, all focused on elevating her community, empowering young women, and reclaiming control of the narrative of her life. "You've come far, Aisha," Alumide said, leaning back. "And you didn't even realize the power you had all along. Most people break under what you've endured." She smiled, a faint curve, soft yet unshakable. "Most people don't have the luxury of tears that teach them strength." I do. Walking back home through the streets of Lagos, the market sounds and traffic no longer overwhelmed her. Every street corner, every honking taxi, and every bustling crowd seemed to whisper encouragement. You survived. You overcame. You are unstoppable. At her apartment, she paused before the door, fingers brushing the handle, remembering the first days she had arrived in Lagos, full of hope and naivety. The journey had been long years of tears, betrayals, silent endurance, but it had built something unbreakable. She knew one thing for certain. Her heart could never be underestimated again. Love, loyalty, and trust were gifts she would give, but only to those who respected her worth. The lessons of pain were now her compass, guiding her toward the life she truly deserved. Looking out once more at the glittering skyline, Aisha whispered to herself, a vow as much as a reflection. Years of tears have made me stronger than I ever imagined. And from now on, I write my story on my terms. In that moment, Lagos seemed to pause, not in acknowledgement of her victory, but as a witness to the quiet, indomitable strength of a woman who had endured, learned, and emerged whole. And for viewers, the lesson is clear. Betrayal may break trust, hardship may test endurance. But true strength is forged in silence, sharpened by experience, and realized when one finally claims control of their own destiny. Aisha Bello had wept for years. And now she stood taller, fiercer, and more alive than she had ever been.